Come on, Days. Come on. Ah, I love you to death, but you're just everywhere. What's up, yins, guys? Welcome back to Fishing PA with Ryan Reed. In this episode, I'm going to continue on with my lake breakdown series, and we're going to talk about the Allegheny Reservoir, or Kinzua Dam. Now, Kinzua, or the Allegheny Reservoir, spans the border between New York and Pennsylvania. On the Pennsylvania side, it's completely surrounded by the Allegheny National Forest. Now, the Allegheny Reservoir gives you guys lots of opportunities to be outdoors, primarily with its camping, its hiking, its boating, and of course, its awesome fishing. In my opinion, Kinzua is one of the largest and most popular outdoor recreational complexes in all of the northeastern United States. Now, Kinzua has about 12,080 acres and a max depth of 130 feet. Now, most of you know that Kinzua is actually an impoundment of the Allegheny River, which was constructed back in 1965 by the Army Corps of Engineers. Now, Kinzua has several major tributaries, one of which being Kinzua Creek, another being Sugar Run, Willow Run, and obviously Red House Brook. Now, the featured species at Kinzua is primarily going to be walleye, but you also have a very healthy population of smallmouth bass, pike, and the ever so elusive Mr. Musky. Now, there's a lot of other species in there like trout and catfish that we may or may not touch on in this episode. Now, you guys know that the reservoir is primarily for flood control. So what that means is the water is constantly fluctuating and it's very, very turbulent. So that also means that there's not a lot of natural reproduction in Kinzua, so the stocking effort is absolutely critical for the majority of the species of fish that live there. Now, 75% of the angling pressure on Kinzua is primarily walleye anglers. So that tells you that Kinzua is a fantastic walleye fishery. Now, aside from the walleye fishery, Kinzua is really known for its massive, massive muskies. It's not a very high volume population, but if you get a strike there, it could potentially be the next PA state record. So let's take a few minutes just to kind of talk about some of the features of the lake, and then we'll go ahead and get into the hotspot map portion of the discussion. All right, let's talk about our first feature here. We're going to talk about the water in Kinzua. Now, the water is only moderately fertile, and part of that has to do with the amount of water that's rushing through there. Again, it's for flood control. So when it rains or there's a lot of runoff, the water levels are constantly fluctuating. And what that causes is it causes natural structure like weeds. It really causes them to have a hard time to grow. So there's not a lot of natural structure in Kinzua because of that fluctuating water level and the amount of turbulence that because of how much water is being pushed through there. Now, the water, though, is mostly clean. However, it has sort of like a greenish tint to it, and that's, again, mostly because of the amount of water that's flushing through it. Now, the other thing to note about the water, Kinzua does not have a thermocline. And the reason for that, again, is the amount of rushing water and the oxygen levels are fairly high throughout the entire impoundment. The other item to talk about with Kinzua, aside from no thermocline, is really the depletion of oxygen starting in the month of October as that water is drained down in order to hold more runoff. So you're going to have less oxygen in that body of water starting in October up until probably ice out. All right, let's talk about the composition of the bottom, starting with the main lake. Now, the main lake is mostly going to be composed of sand in gravel with some widespread boulder fields. Now, in some of the bays, the bottom is going to be composed of mostly silt and mud with, again, some additional boulder fields throughout the entire bay. All right, let's talk about the shoreline at Kinzua. The shoreline is roughly 91 miles long. The terrain is extremely rugged and it's extremely wooded. So you're going to have prime opportunities to fish fallen trees that are going to hold fish. Now again, in Pennsylvania, the entire lake is surrounded by the Allegheny National Forest. So it's a beautiful area to do some fishing, and it's a beautiful area to explore in general. All right, let's talk about cover for a second. Now, cover at Kinzua. Very, very interesting lake as far as natural cover goes. Now, you guys will find that they clear cut a lot of the trees. So you're not going to find a lot of tree structure out in the middle of the lake. However, the water level, again, being that it fluctuates so much and it's so turbulent, weed growth is very minimal. So you're not going to have a lot of super awesome weed beds. You might have some weeds here and there, but you're not going to see weeds like you do on maybe like a Lake Chautauqua in New York, or maybe like a Moraine State Park here in Pennsylvania. It's just different. It's a different impoundment, and there's not a lot of that natural structure. So what that means is there's a tremendous amount of man-made structure. So man put porcupine cribs, and they put a lot of like Christmas trees or pine tree structure, like piles of brush, in and around areas of that lake in order to give those fish a safe haven or some place for them to kind of go and hide in the structure. So your primary cover is exactly that. It's all going to be man-made tire reefs and man-made brush piles and, of course, man-made porcupine cribs. One last thing before we get into the map discussion. The bait fish. The bait fish in Kinzua is primarily composed of spot-tail shiners and emerald shiners. Now, there's also a healthy panfish population in there, so your crappie, your perch, your bluegill, and a lot of the bigger game fish are going to feed on those. Your musky and your pike and your walleye, they're going to chase those types of fish. However, there's also some red horse in there, and there's a healthy white sucker population. And you guys know that the pike and the musky love the white sucker, and that's going to be a really solid tip for you because you're going to want to throw those style of baits when you're fishing this lake. All right, guys, hopefully I gave you a good bit of information on the impoundment. What I'd like to do right now is I'd like to go ahead and jump into the map and show you some of my highlighted hotspots. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to move very, very quickly here because there's a lot of information. As you guys know, Kinzua is a massive, massive lake. So there's a lot of points I want to get to. In order to keep this thing shorter, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to scroll into the map. I have my trusty Kinzua map here. And we're going to start at the PA-New York state line. Now I'm not going to talk about New York here. The reason for that is we're going to focus on Pennsylvania. So everything south of the state line is really where we're going to focus on. So starting here, we're going to see Webb's Ferry boat launch on the left. Please note that the purple line is the channel. This to me is where I know the channel is at. Now it might be a little off on the map, but you guys can get the basic idea. Now to the right here, we're going to go into one of my favorite areas, Willow Bay. Now Willow Bay at the mouth of it's going to be 50 feet, and you're going to have Willow Bay boat ramp. Now Willow Bay boat ramp is an excellent spot to launch because right off the boat launch, you're going to have tire reefs and you're going to have brush piles. Now Willow Bay is going to offer you those structure points which are going to hold fish. Now note 50 to 30 feet of water, about halfway back in the cove or the bay, you're going to see 30 feet. And at the very back end of the bay, you're going to have brush piles, and the water depth is going to be about 10 feet right where it runs in to Willow Run. So that's an excellent starting point for you. Now we're going to follow the channel south. And note that the average water depth of Allegheny Reservoir up in this end of the lake is about 70 feet. As we move south here, the average water depth is going to continue at 70 feet, and the channel jumps to the other side of the lake. Now note Corn Planter Run here on the left. Corn Planter Run is going to be a hot spot that we're going to talk about later. We're going to go down past Whiskey Run and Johnny Cake Run, and we're going to kind of follow the channel all the way down until we get to this point, which is going to be an average water depth of 90 feet. As we continue south, we're going to hit our second hot spot, Hodge Run. Now, Hodge Run has a few porcupine cribs that have been put into the lake, and you guys can find those on your depth finders. One key point here is note that at the mouth, it's 70 feet. It moves to 50 feet in this end of the bay, and then as we get back toward the end of the split in each side of the bay, it's going to go from 30 feet to 10 feet. Those are excellent areas for you guys to find because of the transition in ledges from 10 to 20 to 30 to 40 to 50 feet of water all the way out to 70. Hodge Run is an excellent area to do some fishing. Now, as we jump across the other side of the lake here, we're going to run into Sugar Bay. Now, Sugar Bay for me is really one of the highlight hotspots of this lake. Note that Sugar Bay is a no-wake zone. At the mouth of Sugar Bay, you have 90 feet of water. Now, on this end of Sugar Bay, along this shoreline, you're going to see random piles of brush. Brush piles hold fish. Again, there's not a lot of natural structure, so a lot of this structure is man-made. So we're talking about Christmas or pine trees. A lot of these brush piles are going to be pine trees that were put there by man. So we're going to have all these piles of structure here in 90 to 70 feet of water in this stretch, and they are going to continue to hold fish. Now notice the channel here kind of works back to the end of Sugar Bay. We're going to go from 90 to 70 feet of water, eventually hit 50 feet of water, and then 30 and 10 feet of water. Keep Sugar Bay in mind because of these transition points. Fish like certain water depths at certain times of the year, and there's a lot of ledges back in there. In the very back end of the cove, you're going to see Sugar Run. Anytime you have water coming in or out, it's usually a pretty good area to do some fishing. So we're going to continue down here. We're going to follow our channel down past Billy's Run, and we're going to come to one of the premier hotspots on this lake. And the premier hotspot that I'm going to give you is Kinzua Point. Now, Kinzua Point has a lot of tire reefs and man-made brush piles all along the point. And the one thing to note is in the middle of the lake here, you have 110 feet of water. It goes from 110 to 90 to 70 to 50 to 30 to 10 feet up against the point. So think of this as we're kind of coning it out. You have 10 feet here, you have 30 feet here, you have 50 feet here, 70, 90, and 110. So again, your drop-offs and your structure points, these are all solid areas for you guys to do some fishing. We're going to come down the left end of the lake past Jackson Run. Please note that the purple line for the channel kind of wraps around the point here and continues down, but this channel will also continue down all the way down the lake to Kinzua Dam outflow. Now the average depth here is 110 feet, but the dam offers excellent shore fishing because there's a lot of options for you guys to go and fish that area. Now realistically, the dam's going to hold brown trout and it's going to hold rainbow trout all year long. However, walleye in late fall and early spring, this is the area that they love to hang out in. They love that deeper water, they love the outflow, and they love the turbulence of that particular area. So for you bank yankers, this is your opportunity to get out here and fish the dam, catch some trout and catch some walleye. And also for those of you that are like me, you're looking for trophy muskie, Kinzua Dam offers trophy muskie opportunities all summer long. And really, again, it has to do with the water depth and just the turbulence of that area. There's a lot of bait fish moving around in there, and there's a lot of fish in general certain times of the year. So keep that in mind if you like to shore fish. Now, as we move back around Kinzua Point here, we're going to talk about the area to the right of the bridge. So we have a couple points of reference. We have Kinzua Wolf Run Marina, and we also have this awesome little place called Docksiders Cafe. So, right outside the bridge as we zoom in, you got the bridge coming across, you have the channel running down the middle, you have some riprap all along this edge, so it might be another good area for you guys to do some fishing. And in addition to that, you have man-made porcupine cribs that were placed here for structure points. So you have these areas where you have some cribs, and then as we kind of work our way down, we got 10 feet of water and we got some nice man-made brush piles. Now, when you guys find Kinzua Beach, outside of that, you're going to see the cribs and you're going to see those brush piles when you're working that area in a boat. Again, excellent area for you guys to do some fishing. We're going to follow the channel down. You're going to notice some tire reefs on the opposite side. And as we follow the channel south, we are going to get to a point where we're going to hit Dewdrop Run. Now, again, anytime you guys find a run, it's a good area to focus on because you have water coming out or water going in, and those areas are going to hold fish. So we're going to work our way south here, and we're going to get to Elijah Run. Now, Elijah Run is, again, one of my other highlighted hot spots because you have a really awesome boat ramp in Elijah Boat Ramp right here, and then you also have these tire reefs all along the shoreline with man-made brush piles. In addition to that, right off the launch, you're going to run into some porcupine cribs. Man-made structure at Kinzua is critical. And the reason for that has to do, again, with the amount of water fluctuating and just the turbulence overall. It's not a good habitat for just natural reproduction of plants. So you're going to have to rely on, fallen trees and brush that just kind of fell in and moved around the area, in addition to these man-made tire reefs and these man-made brush piles. So Elijah Run, put that on your list to do some fishing. We're going to follow the channel down and we're going to run into Dutchman Run. Now, Dutchman Run, again, tire reefs and brush piles. Dutchman Run comes in there, so you're going to be able to find some fish because of that in or outflow. Now, we're going to jump across Kinzua Bay here, and we're going to focus on this point right towards Morrison Run. Now, you guys have Morrison Campground right here. So when you find Morrison Campground on this shoreline, note that these porcupine cribs sit right outside of that. This is going to be an excellent area for you guys to continue doing some fishing. So we're going to move south again through Kinzua Bay, and we're going to have an average water depth here of about 50 feet. You guys are going to notice on this point here, we're going to have some tire reefs, and as we kind of work our way back into Chapel Bay, which is probably one of the best areas to do some bass fishing or just fishing in general, you're going to have tire reefs, you're going to have brush piles, you're going to have 30 feet of water moving back into 10 feet, and then you're going to hit Chapel Run. Chapel Run is a focal point. I cannot tell you that enough. Chapel Run produces a lot of fish all year long. So keep in mind this structure, this man-made structure, and that's going to put you guys on some fish. Again, 10 to 20 to 30 to 50 feet of water. Look for those drop-offs certain times of the year to catch your walleyes and to catch other species of fish in that area. Let's go ahead and continue south here. And we're going to follow the channel to one of our last destinations that we want to talk about. As we work around the channel, you guys are going to notice some tire reefs in this area, and you're going to notice 30 feet of water. Now, when we get down to this area, you have another option, and it's Kinzua Boat Ramp. So this boat ramp is going to put you at the south end of the reservoir. You're going to have about 10 feet of water, and you're also going to find the Red Bridge fishing area. Now, the Red Bridge fishing area, this is a huge focal point for those of you that like to do some bank yanking. So shoreline anglers, you guys are going to want to focus on Red Bridge Bank because this is a real big hot spot for you guys. You have the bridge coming in, you have a lot of good structure, and you also have Kinzua Creek. Kinzua Creek is one of the better options on this end of the lake to do any type of fishing. Anytime you have a flowage like this, you guys are going to continue to locate species of fish at certain times of the year, and primarily this is going to be one of the best bass fishing areas in the entire impoundment. All right, guys, we're going to take some time to talk about the Allegheny Reservoir or Kinzua. We're going to talk about fishing tips and techniques. And I'm primarily going to focus on walleye, musky, smallmouth bass, pike, and trout. Now for walleye, there's actually 3 phases of Kinzua fishing. You have spring, you have summer, and you have fall that I'm going to cover. Now you guys know I don't do a lot of winter or ice fishing, so that's why I left that segment out. The first portion we're going to talk about is Kinzua spring walleye. So from opening day through mid-June is probably the best time to catch Kinzua walleye. Those walleye are going to be between 5 and 20 feet of water, and they're going to hold up in bays with major inlet streams and also bays that have sloping drop-offs. So we're talking about bays like Sugar and Willow and Corn Planter and Chapel. And really, the Red Bridge area is another key location in the spring for you guys to locate those Kinzua walleye. My recommendation for you is to troll worm harnesses or potentially wind drift vertical jigging shiners to produce fish in those areas. Now in summer, the walleye pattern changes. We know that the walleye move deeper in the summertime, and at Kinzua it's typically between 30 and 60 feet of water. You guys need to look for points with slopes at the mouth of bays like Chapel, Hodge Run, Sugar, and Willow Bay. Again, I'm going to recommend wind drifting while vertical jigging. A little additional tip, if you guys can find a jig with additional blades, that's going to add flash and vibration to draw those fish into the bait in that turbulent water. My other recommendation is to troll deep diving crankbaits like Hottentots or Thunder Sticks or even Reef Runners. Now for fall, October and November, those are the months to find the walleye back in that 15 to 20 feet of water range. Those fish are going to come in from the depths into that shallow water. Again, you guys know I love vertical jigging. Vertical jigging shiners or wind drifting worm harnesses, that's going to be my weapon of choice for fall fishing walleye at Kinzua. Now let's talk about musky fishing. Kinzua is the home to massive muskies. Now in the spring, May and June, you guys are going to find the muskie in and around fallen trees in those stump fields in that 8 to 15 feet of water range. The rest of the year though, you guys are going to have to find major lake points over channels in large bays, again, like Sugar, Willow, Chapel, and Hodge Run. My experience and everything that I've read seems to suggest that the muskies suspend in deeper water and follow the bait fish. If you guys can get into those areas with those major lake points over the channels, my recommendation for you is going to be trolling big crankbaits down about 15 to 30 feet in roughly 20 to 50 feet of water. The muskie are spread way out at Kinzua, and that's really because of the lack of natural structure. So my recommendation for you guys is troll hard and troll fast to cover as much water as possible, and that will put you in contact with that species of fish. Now, smallmouth bass at Kinzua. I don't do a lot of smallmouth bass fishing. However, Chapel Bay is going to be the most exceptional area for smallmouth in the spring. You guys are going to want to look for that 4 to 8 feet of water range at the upper end of the bays. I would cast crankbaits or maybe do a little jerk baiting or even potentially throw some soft plastics in those areas. Now, July through September, smallmouth move off to rocky bottoms in about 10 to 20 feet of water, and the recommendation that I have for you guys is to do some wind drifting with minnows or do some vertical jigging with tubes, and that will help you produce fish. Now, another species that I love to fish, especially at Kinzua, is pike. May and June, you guys are going to find the pike at Willow, Sugar, and Chapel Bays. My recommendation for you guys is to cast spoons in about that 10 to 15 feet of water range, but get yourself in the areas in and around stumps, and that's where you're going to produce your fish. Now, in all honesty, I have not done well at Kinzua, and I don't know many people that do well at Kinzua outside of May and June when we're talking about fishing for pike. And the reason for that has to be the fish move off deeper into that 15 to 60 feet of water range, and it's really hard for us to get our baits down there in an area in the strike zone that a pike's going to take it. Now, a lot of you guys may have had some success there, so that's fantastic. Personally, I would probably try to troll larger crankbaits or larger spoons as deep as I can get them in order to produce those fish. If you guys have any information on pike fishing Kinzua, please drop me a comment so it can benefit everybody. One last thing. You guys know I'm not a big trout fisherman. I fish for trout maybe 1 or 2 days a year. However, if you guys like trout fishing, my recommendation is get out to Kinzua in October. Spend the majority of your time in Kinzua Creek or Sugar or Willow Run, and that will help you guys produce the trout that you guys are looking for. All right, boys and girls. I tried to do my best to give you guys as much information on the Allegheny Reservoir as possible. You know, we talked about the lake and the river, and we talked about the fish and the habitat, and we gave you some key features that will hopefully help you put some fish in the boat. My other goal with this was to kind of share some of my hot spots and kind of share some of my techniques that I would typically use when fishing Kinzua. I really hope you guys found this to be beneficial. Now, if you guys liked the video, go ahead and hit that like button for me. If you guys like the content overall, please subscribe to my channel. I'm really looking forward to getting some feedback on this particular video because Kinzua is really one of the more difficult lakes for me to fish. Hopefully you guys seen something or you heard something that maybe sparked some questions and we can get a general discussion going. I just want to thank everybody for hanging in there with me. I know this is yet another long video, but I greatly appreciate everybody's time. I wish all of you tight lines. See you next time.